Who is one woman you would consider a 10 tenths? I work in education in the UK. I'm a pastoral manager, which basically means I deal with all the shy behavior as well as getting to do lots of positive things to improve said behavior, and a designated safeguarding leader. I was dealing with a situation where a 15 years old boy had been pestering a girl in his class and wouldn't take no for an answer. She showed me a message thread and there was some serious incel vibes. He would flip-flop between loving and hating her. Eventually, he sent her a message apologizing for his actions and said that he now has a girlfriend in Canada. She was a very sweet kid and accepted the apology. He leaned into the lie over the next few messages. He sent her a picture of his girlfriend who looked suspiciously like August Ames' deceased porn star, but my favorite bit was that she's moving to Texas soon because her dad has got a new job as a sheriff. I shit you not, I once had a long-distance relationship with a girl from Montreal who I met traveling when I lived in Barcelona. We met in November of 2014, and she was supposed to come visit in May 2015. We used to write each other long letters and Skype a couple times a week. All my friends heard about it and I talked her up a ton. Around end of March 2015, she ghosted me. I guess things were getting real and she didn't want to follow through with the trip and didn't know how to explain it to me. I was gutted. The woman I loved by that time was gone with no real explanation or closure. May came around and there was no visit from Naomi. No beautiful French-Canadian girl to introduce to my friends. The Canadian girlfriend is real, and I lived it. A fellow will remember a lot of things you wouldn't think he'd remember. You take me. One day back in 1896, I was crossing over to Jersey on the ferry, and as we pulled out there was another ferry pulling in, and on it, there was a girl waiting to get off. A white dress she had on. She was carrying a white parasol. I only saw her for 1 second. She didn't see me at all, but I'll bet a month hasn't gone by since that. I haven't thought of that girl. Oh, God, I was sat in between a hunky Australian and a drop-dead gorgeous Italian. The Italian was super nice, helped me with the earphone jack, passing the food over to me, and even tried starting a conversation with me about Terry Pratchett, which I was reading. I could say nothing. The whole flight. Maybe thanks once. Could be a decade ago, but it still brings me cringe to this day. Amazing Italian guy on the flight to Perth. I'm really sorry, it was my awkwardness. I was floored by your sheer sexiness and consideration. Couldn't handle it at all. I think everybody, guys and girls, have had this happen probably more than once, lol. It's one of those situations where you think of the perfect response 6 hours later while taking a shower and then break down crying your eyes out because you've just realized that you're a hopeless failure and doomed to wander the earth alone, till inevitably meeting your end in some alleyway while on the walk home from getting plastered at the pub by yourself. The first time I saw a beautiful woman walk past me in a mall, only saw her for a few seconds. Did not approach her, would have been weird, but remembered her regularly for months after and regretted not having the courage to approach her. About a half-year later, I saw another beautiful woman during a long bus journey sitting a few rows away. We made eye contact, but did not interact directly. As we arrived at our destination and were getting off the bus, I remembered the first woman and the regret I felt. So I collected all my courage, turned to this beautiful woman, and just said, "Excuse me. I know this is very forward, but I will never forgive myself if I don't ask. Would you like to have a drink with me at some point this week?" The only time in my life I asked out a woman I did not know. Never needed to do it again. We have now been together for over 25 years and are very happily married with 2 kids. I have to imagine that legendary beauties from bygone eras would not raise any heads today. Standards of beauty differ across cultures and change over time. We're talking about an era earlier than ancient Greeks by almost 1,000 years. Also, Spartan women were very different than women in other Greek states. It was basically a requirement that they had to go through grueling fitness courses during their education. They ran the household while the men were off fighting or training, which was basically always until the men were too old to fight, had more political power, and because of the physical fitness requirements, they were considered by far the most attractive of all Greek women. Those are ancient Spartans, and not Mycenaean Spartans, though, so it's a different time period. In other cultures, beauty has been tied to signs of wealth and luxury. That's why, for example, during the time that Snow White was written, being very pale was a sign of beauty. The average person spent significant amounts of time working outside. So being pale was a sign that you were wealthy enough to stay inside. As more people started having indoor jobs, being tan became a sign of beauty because it meant you could afford to spend time outside in the sun. There have also been periods where chubbiness was highly regarded because it was seen as a sign that you could afford to eat more. I don't know what the standards of beauty were in ancient Greece or Sparta to know whether fitness was an aesthetic goal during those time periods. About 15 years ago, I got rejected by my crush, and my mom was diagnosed with cancer about a week before my birthday. A girl I had been friends with for a few years found out, made me a birthday cake, and threw a tiny little party for me. I married that girl, and we have a baby boy together. Never once had I thought about my wife romantically before that moment. Kindness is a hell of a drug. I remember I was nearly killed after getting hit by a lumber truck. After they finally let me leave hospital, I was still bedridden. A friend of mine came over several times a day to spoon feed me and make sure I was alright. Through the first day, all the pain went away, and I realized I loved this person. She passed away a little while ago, and I'm just trying to find meaning in life again, but it isn't easy. It won't be easy for at least a year or two, maybe more, but it gets better. It gets easier. The more time passes, the closer you get to a day where you're now very used to your new normal. That will hurt, but it's when it'll really start getting better. Hang in there. Hold on to the small moments that don't hurt for now. I realized while doing my laundry last week that the only thing I had that she had seen was my suit and a Pac Man shirt she had gotten me. It may seem gimmicky at this point, but there comes a time where there's no clothes that your past loved ones have seen you in. I was watching the Equalizer movies when I realized it. He mentioned that he had no clothes left that his wife had seen, and it sent me spiraling trying to find something that she'd seen. I haven't worn the suit since the funeral, and I'm sure now it would have too small a waistline for me. That's something that nobody warns you about: loss after losing someone who you couldn't live without. You don't see a need or a reason to take care of yourself. She had life insurance, and she always said, "What if I die? You won't be able to work, you'll barely get off the lounge." Cause I'd say it's unnecessary to have such a premium life insurance policy. I'm starting to do better. Had my first bit of real food in years. It was her favorite recipe, and I cried all the way through it, but she would have been proud that I didn't burn it. I'm old, and I've seen something all my life about couples that stay together happily. It's not necessarily the white-hot obsessive passion couples that make it in the long run. It's the attracted to each other, but mostly kind to each other couples. So many times, I've seen people insanely in love, get married, and 3 years later, the faults that the infatuation disguise come to the surface, and they're complaining about each other, have a terrible S3X life that used to be awesome, and they split up bitterly. Kind people just don't do that. Luckily for you, attractive, successful females have their pick of the crowd. Lol. Seriously though, I guess it is all that anyone really needs, but I just don't think I've ever had it. I told my ex-wife many times, I just want to be happy, and told her what that entails. I just want someone who's happy to see me and is easy to be with, and it seemed like she went out of her way to avoid doing that. I tell my sons all the time, if you like a girl, then tell her she's beautiful. Then don't force any awkward conversation after saying it, just leave it at that. Then if she seeks you out later to start a conversation, you know she's into you. The trick here is that a guy can never be on a girl's radar till that compliment, then she starts wondering, what if this one girl that's going to the same party as me tomorrow, she's so great, man, can't wait to see her again. My first award and everything. Thank you all for the nice comments. I'll come back and update you if I'm not completely heartbroken. Party is in a few hours, but I thought I'd give you some context since people have been asking. I've been in love with this girl for years, but I haven't gotten to see her much after we graduated high school a while ago. I've only had the balls to talk to her a few times, but she is an absolute gem. So when I was 17, I was at my uncle's funeral, clearly a very sad day. We went to the wake and my cousin brought a friend, Steven. My cousin was 25, so I assume his friend was around the same age. After a while, my cousin's girlfriend came up to me all giddy with excitement. and said, "Steven really likes you, what do you think?" I honestly don't know if I spoke a word to him. I was with my family in the usual grief process. I blew her off, and didn't think much more of it until she came back to me after a few minutes, and said, "Steven is really upset that you said no. He's sitting outside crying. Do you think you could go talk to him?" I didn't waste any time on him or even thinking about him, but now, the memory makes me laugh. A mid-20s dude hitting on me via friend at a wake and then making it all about him when he got rejected to the point he's outside crying and needs consoling at a wake. Good lord. Sort of similar thing. My nan died suddenly of cancer, and it really took its toll on my mom. I think it was about 2 days after her death, and my stepdad suggests a walk round the boating lake. Apparently he had grown at S's 40-something-year-old started crying saying, my mom hadn't been giving him any attention lately. My mom said she couldn't even muster a what the faff. He was also cheating on her with his ex for 15 years. Mom found his dick pics on a digital camera, and letters cleared out my mom's inheritance out of the joint account. Took all my graduation pics and all the pics of my half-brother, his son, when they finally split. Dudes who cry at not getting attention during tragedy are fucking weirdos and walking red flags. Unrequited love happened to me. Except after months of attention and affection, she stopped and started making me chase while going after a guy 10 years older than her. She waits for me to talk or ask first, then she shuts me down, ignores or avoids. And when I tried to talk to her about how she changed with me, she told me to try harder, which just proved she wanted me to chase. And then we got into an argument and stopped being friends. After the argument, someone told me that about her, and it's just silly that it might actually work. Silly or ridiculous is the only words I can think of, but I doubt it would be work since she was glued to that guy, like caressing him level of glued, and that's when I reached my limit and had enough. To hell with that. I'm out. The woman I get to marry tomorrow. Yep, best memory I have of my wedding is my wife, and I managed to sneak outside for 2 minutes after dinner when everyone was moving to the dance floor. We just danced for just a bit with just the two of us before the dance floor slowly filled up. I don't think I've ever loved anybody more in my life than in that moment. My wife, she just recently gave birth to her first child, and I've only found her more and more attractive since. It's as if my lizard brain appreciates her giving me a perfectly healthy child, and now whenever I see her I get harder than a diamond. Obviously, my actual brain appreciates that too. Michelle Pfeiffer circa the late 80s to early 90s. Kathleen Turner circa the early 80s. Lauren Bacall in the 40s. Faye Dunaway in the 60s and 72nds. Meg Ryan in the early 90s. Demi Moore in the very early 90s before she sold out around the mid-90s and started marketing herself like a porn star. Kelly Preston in the 80s to 2000s. She always looked classy and brilliant right up until the end. Marilyn Monroe. Tippi Hedren in the 60s. Janet Leigh in the late 50s to early 60s. Denise Richards in the mid-90s. Although she did so many cheap roles, she still had a unique beauty that was very captivating. She was just presented by the media as cheap and tacky. Cindy Crawford and Claudia Schiffer are another two from the 80s and early 90s who were beautiful. Jackie Kennedy circa the 60s. The vintage Bond girls like Ursula Andress, Raquel Welch or Lois Chiles from the 60s and 72nds. Sharon Stone in the early 90s. Basically mostly those old traditional Hollywood stars from the past. They had a look, screen presence and beauty that isn't seen anymore. Hollywood seemed to stop casting them in the early to mid-90s. The femme fatale type who just lit up the screen. Even lesser-known actresses who were on TV and were attractive from the 60s to 90s were generally better looking than today's actresses, as they were natural looking and not filled with surgery etc. these days. I'm not saying today's actresses aren't attractive, they are, but you had much fewer famous women back in the day, and the ones we had really stood out and had something you just didn't see in your average woman or in everyday life. You just don't get it anymore. And many of today's icons look generic, and you'd see the same out on a Saturday night. They are too made up looking. For example, Jennifer Lawrence is very attractive, yet she's just lacking that something the old school actresses and female star from the past had. She looks like a girl band member or the typical teen soap opera star. I think the last of these rare type of beauties I ever saw on screen was around in the mid-noughties with Misha Barton. She just looked like an old-school movie star, natural and not overly made up. The camera loved her, and even if you hated the Ock, you still would notice her presence on screen. Or maybe Kristen Kruk from Smallville, who played Lana, was another who had that old-school natural beauty. She had an elegant, beautiful look in the infancy of her career, and I really thought she'd be Hollywood gold around the time of Orange County, but her fame was fleeting. And any time I saw her after her early 20s, her beauty had greatly declined, and she looked like she'd let herself go. I really can't think of any other female starlet in the last 25 years though that had that classic Hollywood look. They just don't light up the screen like they used to. Ana de Armas, no doubt. I'm a straight female, gave girls a shot once. Was a no for me dog, but I'd marry the shit out of that woman just to look at her face every day. Fell in love with her during Blade Runner 2049. I learned recently that she had a shit ton of work done. I should have realized before, but her work is good work. But if you find pics of her from when she was younger and not fully in the industry, or from her first film, holy shit, she's always had such a unique pure beauty to her that is mesmerizing. And if you watch her in her films, her charisma is out of this world. She's got something magnetic to her that draws you in. She's always been flawless, and I really hope she doesn't fall further down the Hollywood plastic surgery rabbit hole and eliminate all the special qualities that make her so gorgeous. 10/10 would fight against my own hardwired sexuality for that woman. My Sicilian grandmother. You had to know her to understand. Everyone who knew her would agree. The woman never did anything in her life that was even remotely bad. She cooked and cleaned and loved everyone, and did her rosary beads every day until she got a brain tumor and eventually died a few months later. God bless you, Nana. There was this woman I met at a bar one night. I would run into her every once in a while. I lived in a pretty small town. Never even knew her name, but I used to joke that'll be my future ex-wife one day. I have no idea where she is today, and I live 1,500 miles away from my hometown, but I sure hope that she found her happiness. In history, Audrey Hepburn. In real life, this one teller at a local bank who looks like a goddess. Perfect features, large clear blue eyes, almost white blonde hair, and an amazing smile that could light up a cave. Having been a goblin my entire life, extremely attractive women usually don't do much for me, because I always knew I would never had a shot. If I saw one coming, I'd appreciate them, but wouldn't react because I was prepared. But goddammit, the first time I saw her it shocked the hell out of me. It took everything not to react when she smiled as I handed her my deposit slip. The surprise at seeing her the first time was like being in the shower washing your hair, and when you open your eyes a big spider had dropped down on a web and was dangling in front of you. My mum, she's amazing. She's pretty funny, the purest soul you'll ever meet, and will accept you into the family as soon as I befriended you. She's amazing and showed my brother and me so much love and support in the past 20 to 26 years. It's amazing. Even when we acted like sh-holes, she's the one woman I'd ever consider a 10/10. She's the best. My best friend. I don't have feelings for her anymore, but she is perfect. She's the only person in the world that literally just makes my day better by being around. Her sense of humor, her music taste, her style, everything about her is amazing, but we're friends. I'm thankful she's my friend, because she is the best friend I've ever had, but sometimes I wonder if in a different lifetime things could have been different. Years ago in the subway in Montreal, heard heels coming from around the bend in the tunnel to the train. I looked up from lighting a cigarette, yes it was that long ago, and saw a dark-haired woman wearing tight jeans, cowboy boots, and a knotted white cotton shirt exposing her midriff. With each sharp crack of her heels on the floor, her unharnessed breasts swayed rhythmically under the cotton. She knew a 20-year-old boy was looking at her, and she couldn't have cared less. That was 1980, and that vision still disturbs my rest. Someone who's like my great-aunt. Someone I'd always look forward to seeing. Someone I couldn't let go even if it's just a minute. Someone I could open to without being judged, yelled, or belittled with. someone who understands me, someone will always be there for me. And of course, someone who's patient and will love me for who I am, not because of something you have, money, investments, etc. I want that person to do the same thing for me, and I will do the same for them. On top of that, I want someone that would actually work with me, not just sit in there at S's all day doing nothing. I don't mind if they don't know how to cook or do stuff, as I can always teach them. Of course, I want to be with someone that wouldn't yell and be chi-chi at me 24/7. I could care less about S3X how big her body is. As long as we're compatible and share the same values, she's good enough for me. That one girl I saw while walking to my college on day with my face looking like an idiot because of some color powder I found on the road. I took some of the color powder on my fingers and put it on my head vertically and walked like I was some frickin' dumb guy. It was after a minute tat, I saw her walking opposite to the direction I was. I saw her and my heart skipped a beat. See, maybe I was in love. She smiled looking at me and my eyes were directly staring at her in a good way. After she walked past me, I started sweating like hell. It was then that I realized I had this ugly looking color powder on my forehead, and she probably smiled because of that. Anyway, I never met her again, even though we study at the same college. I don't know her name. I don't know anything about her favkit. I don't even remember how she looked like. I'm waiting for that same feeling to understand if it's her in case we meet someday in the future. My friend that I have a huge crush on, that I invited to my house to play music with me on New Year's Eve. I'm planning to tell her how much I love her and if she wants to be my GF. Wish me luck everyone and Happy New Year. She said let's just be friends. I was sort of expecting this answer, but I still feel finda disappointed. But hey, that's life. I guess. Happy New Year to everyone who see this comment. I wish you all a 2023 full of joy and happiness. This one is outside the box of what people, I would guess in general, call a 10/10. I am also older, so even the effects of age don't bother me, but I understand for someone young, age and its related physical effects may knock points off. But more at Tierney, I realize some features or body measurements may not fit the typical 10/10, but she has a unique look that appeals to me so much. She is also 1 year younger than me, so Mora, if you are single, I am available. Lol. Usually, what I would call an atypical beauty, I tend to find atypical beauty much more attractive to, for lack of better word, stereotypical beauty. Another atypical beauty is Sigourney Weaver. Always found her incredibly attractive since the first movie I saw her in. Another atypical beauty. A girl whom I've known since 2017. We first met in the school library when I was 14 years old and she was 1 year older than me. I had no friend and I was a total loser back then, so the library was the only place I'd spent my lunch break time. One day, one random girl that I even don't know came to me and asked my name, grade and class numbers kind of things. I was a bit surprised that she was the first one who actually become my friend, since I was too fat and looked weird. About a couple years, I went to the library every single day after having lunch to see her. She always made me smile and that I was able to overcome my status quo. Even after she was graduated from middle school, she was still my friend. She moved to another city after she was graduated, but we kept contact each other on the phone. I actually met her few days age on Christmas. She was same as when I first met her, especially her kind personality. It's really confusing cause she's my friend, but at some moments I do feel weird as if I'd loved her. She is the one I know who's so perfect that I don't want to lose.